Discover the incredible journey of a homeless mother. An unexpected proposal changed everything. Sarah clutched the handle of her old minivan, its rusted exterior trembling under the fierce autumn wind. The park, usually a sanctuary of laughter and playful shouts, felt like a cruel reminder of everything she had lost. "Mommy, can we go on the swings?" Lily's innocent voice broke through her thoughts. Sarah forced a smile, masking the unease that churned within her. How could she explain? The swings, like their lives, were rusted and worn, a reflection of her desperate attempt to keep her children afloat amidst the chaos of her reality. Understanding that every second mattered, she answered, "Sure, sweetheart, let's have fun." As the wind whipped around them, she set Ethan down, his tiny hands gripping the swing's chains, while she anchored her thoughts like roots desperately seeking nourishment. Returning to the diner seemed like a fantasy, each memory piercing her heart. Just 3 months ago she had served pancakes and coffee, laughing with regulars who had become family. Now she juggled part-time gigs and dreams just out of reach. Suddenly, the familiar figure of Mr. Johnson, the retired principal, appeared by her side. He had always been a source of solace in the community. Now his presence startled her. "Sarah," he said softly, "I see you're struggling." The weight of his gaze bore into her. "I'd like to help." His offer, a chance to enroll in community college and finish her degree, dangled before her like a lifeline. Yet the moment tasted bittersweet. Could she place her children in an after-school program? What if her education ripped her away from them? Each option was fraught with its own consequences, making her stomach churn with fear. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As she stepped into the community college, the palpable buzz wrapped around her, vibrant and alive. Voices echoed off the walls, filled with ambition and hope, while she hung back, feeling more invisible than ever. Whispers followed her. Homeless mother, they called her, a label that stung and festered. Did they not see the fire burning inside her? Every late-night study session linked back to the 2 small faces waiting for her at home. A guilt-laden knot twisted within. Could her hope for education clash with her obligation as a mother? When a call from the financial aid office shattered her fragile peace, panic surged. Her application had been flagged. Desperation clawed at her throat as she pondered whether her past decisions would sabotage her aspirations. Hadn't she tried too hard? As tears pricked her eyes, the room began to blur. Mr. Johnson's office appeared steady, his calming presence offering a momentary respite. But when he handed her a pamphlet about scholarships, it felt like a cruel joke. The solution lay within her grasp, yet inaccessible, the hope draining right along with her resolve. Standing at the intersection between a better future and her children's uncertain future, Sarah's heartbeat raced, each thud a reminder of the thin line she walked. Could she fight for something greater, or would this endeavor lead to a treacherous path? The weight of her choices pressed in around her, making the air heavy with anguish and doubt. Just as her mind began to spiral into darkness, clarity struck hard. She realized she had to decide, not just for herself, but for the legacy she wanted to build. The choices loomed. What would she do next? The chill of the air blended with the warmth of hope, igniting a flicker of determination deep within Sarah. As she left the office and stepped into the brisk afternoon, the path ahead appeared murky, yet a spark ignited her resolve. If she was going to fight for a better future, she would have to confront her insecurities head-on. Sitting in the corner of the minivan, as her children chattered on the swings, Sarah took a deep breath, her fingers clasped tightly around the worn-out steering wheel. Was she really prepared for this journey? The possibilities that lay ahead began to swirl like leaves caught in a gust of wind, each one a choice she had to make. "Okay, Sarah," she whispered to herself, "you've come this far." The idea of returning to school had once seemed like a distant dream, beyond her reach. But now, her children were quick to remind her that her failures were not their legacy. A sudden wave of clarity washed over her. She needed a plan, an actionable set of steps to take charge of her life. She rummaged through her old backpack, nostalgic for the days she had spent in classrooms surrounded by hopeful peers. Staring at the glossy pamphlet Mr. Johnson had handed her, she noticed the scholarships paired with the words, "No one turned away." Those words rattled in her mind, echoing anew. She would need to examine her own potential more closely. Who knew what resources might be available if she asked for help? The following morning, after dropping Lily and Ethan off at daycare, Sarah returned to the campus, her heart pounding with apprehension. A palpable energy filled the place, voices buzzing with encouragement. She had never considered herself one for academics, but she understood now that the real test wasn't her past. It was the ability to adapt and evolve. With her stomach churning, she approached the financial aid office. This time, instead of fretting, she straightened her shoulders and resolved to face the fear head-on. "I deserve this just as much as anyone else," she muttered, seeking confidence in her own words. As she opened the door to the office, the clerk behind the desk flashed a bright smile that immediately set her at ease. They began reviewing her application together, and Sarah shared her story, the struggles, the sacrifices, her yearning to provide for her children while pursuing her dreams. The clerk listened with empathy, nodding along as Sarah articulated her desire to reintegrate into academia. "You have options here," the clerk declared, as they began discussing the prerequisites for the scholarships she thought were out of reach. In that moment, the weight of doubt began to lift. Sarah realized she was building bridges, not walls, as they mapped out her potential pathways to financial aid and support. Days turned into weeks as Sarah honed her focus. Classes, once a distant memory, now filled her schedule. Determination replaced doubt. She immersed herself in her studies, finding solace in textbooks. During fulfilling afternoons spent in the library, she discovered an aptitude for creative writing that surprised her. Words poured out of her like a long-buried secret, turning into vivid expressions of her journey. However, the distractions were ever present. There lay the constant reminder of her precarious situation, a nagging voice in the back of her mind that whispered of her shortcomings. Tension brewed as she fielded phone calls from daycare, mired in worries about pickup times and sudden fees that threatened to derail her fragile stability. Yet there was a resilience taking root, an unwavering belief in her capability to succeed. Standing in front of the mirror one morning, Sarah whispered an electric promise to herself. "This is your moment." Just as she began to embrace her newfound identity as a student, a shadow loomed not far from her. A familiar face from her past unexpectedly resurfaced, presenting a potentially hazardous challenge that could threaten everything she had worked for. The time had come to face not just her uncertainty, but the specter of her former life. What would it ultimately cost her to reclaim her future? Sarah's chest tightened as she wandered through the campus paths, the sun dipping low and casting long shadows that echoed the uncertainty brewing inside her. There he was, Mark, a reminder of a life she had left behind but could never quite escape. Memories flooded in like a relentless tide, each one a haunting reminder of past failures, choices that had left her adrift. Today, however, was not the day for despair. Today was about standing firm and acknowledging how far she had come. "Sarah!" Mark called out, his voice slicing through the evening air. She hadn't expected to see him, not during this fragile moment in her transformation. Her feet instinctively halted. "Can we talk?" Part of her wanted to turn and flee, to ignore the past threatening to envelop her once more. But another part, a fiercer, resolute side she'd been nurturing, compelled her to face him. "What do you want, Mark?" she replied, injecting an edge into her tone, steeling herself for whatever he might throw her way. "I heard you're back in school," he said, an almost begrudging admiration in his voice. "It's great to see you taking control again." The words twisted in her stomach. How could he say that when they both knew the truth of their history? She scrutinized him, searching for signs of sarcasm, but Mark's expression was earnest, perhaps even remorseful. Emotions she had thought he was incapable of feeling. "Why now?" she pressed. "You haven't cared about my life in a long time." His brow furrowed, and she noticed the tired lines etched on his face. "I've seen how hard it is for you. I want to help." The sincerity in his voice surprised her. "I may still have some connections," he continued, An opportunity you might want to consider. It involves some freelance writing work. It could help with your tuition. Caught between disbelief and curiosity, Sarah felt a momentary flicker of excitement. Writing work? Freelance? It was precisely what she had been trying to break into. But could she trust him? "What's the catch?" she asked, her defenses still firmly in place. Mark stepped closer, lowering his voice. "No catch. Just think about it, all right? You've got talent, and maybe together." "Together?" she interrupted, her heart racing. "You have a funny way of showing it. Last time I checked, you walked out when things got tough." "I know." He nodded as regret clouded his eyes. "And I'm not asking for anything in return, except maybe a chance to make amends." Saw through the fog of emotions, Sarah mulled over his offer. It echoed the familiar desperation she felt, the endless hustle, the balancing act of motherhood and academics. Could she afford to take this risk? Was he truly committed to helping her reclaim a measure of stability? Or was this just another ploy? In that moment, she was acutely aware of the widening gulf between what she had accomplished and the chaos that had introduced itself once more. Could the prospect of collaboration genuinely propel her forward? Fingers trembling, she considered the implications of accepting his help. Trust was a long-lost currency, yet at her core, Sarah understood that she needed to be brave, not just for herself, but for her children. "Let me think about it," she finally said, a mixture of determination and caution threading through her voice. As she turned away from Mark, her heart pounded, not just from the encounter, but from the reality of the precarious balance she was attempting to master. It felt as if the universe was testing her resolve, presenting challenges precisely when she believed she was gaining ground. With each step toward the library, Sarah could feel the weight of her choices shifting. Would she turn back to the familiar dangers of her past, or could she find a way to use this opportunity to carve out a future she and her children deserved? Determined not to retreat into old patterns, she resolved to seek accountability, even if it meant confronting a past that threatened to resurface. What would she choose? The light of hope beckoned, yet shadows lurked, both old friends and new challenges in her path. As Sarah entered the library, a nagging question reverberated through her mind, echoing the tension of her indecision. Could she accept help from the one person she vowed never to lean on again? The library's quietness enveloped Sarah, a stark contrast to the turmoil just moments prior. Rows of books loomed around her like silent witnesses, each tome a testament to stories told and lives transformed. As she walked deeper into the stacks, seeking refuge in the familiar scent of paper and ink, her thoughts spiraled. The chaos of her emotions pressed upon her, the disquieting mix of hope and skepticism that Mark's offer stirred within her. What if accepting his help meant reopening doors she had fought hard to close? But then again, what if this was a legitimate chance for change? A sigh slipped past her lips as she settled into a study nook, her mind racing through the possibilities. She pulled out her notebook, cradling the pen between her fingers like a lifeline. Words flowed freely on the page as she poured her thoughts into the margins, contrasting the fear of her past with the flicker of promise the future offered. Each word was a step forward, a declaration of intention to shift from survival to success. In the background, sounds of students discussing their deadlines washed over her, reminding her that others shared in this journey of striving and growing. Inspiration struck as she found herself jotting down ideas for articles, dreams of writing about her experiences as a single mother navigating academia. The more she wrote, the more she felt the boundaries of her identity expanding, empowering her to bring her voice to the forefront. But each bout of excitement collided with the reminders of her past. Mark had been a significant chapter, and the bitter taste of betrayal lingered. How could she trust him now? Frustrated, she slammed the notebook shut. "Why is this so complicated?" she murmured to herself, aware of the tension winding around her thoughts. She closed her eyes for a moment and took a deep breath, attempting to calm the rising tide of anxiety. A flash of clarity struck. She suddenly understood. The real challenge was not accepting Mark's help or choosing to venture into collaboration. It was about rediscovering her strength apart from him. Sarah made a decision. She would meet with Mark, not for dependence, but for discernment. An opportunity to negotiate what their relationship could look like now without the shadows of the past controlling her choices. The freelance writing could mean more than just money. It could be a bridge to the independence she craved, the professional identity she was determined to forge. As she stood to leave, determination coursed through her veins. The library doors felt like a portal, not just to knowledge, but to the future she envisioned. It was time to harness her vulnerabilities, turn them into strengths, and practice claiming her right to thrive. Emerging into the evening light once more, Sarah's heart raced with the prospect of confrontation and potential. She was no longer a passive participant in her life, but an active architect of her narrative. Just as she reached for her phone to call Mark, an unexpected figure melted into her vision. Jenny, an old friend from the past, approached with a face full of warmth, but also loaded with questions about how life had unfolded since they last spoke. What unguarded truths were lurking there? Would her past with Jenny inspire support or resentment? Sarah felt the incoming tidal wave of memories, but beneath it, a flicker of unmistakable courage surged. No matter the outcome, she was ready to embrace the conversation, whatever form it might take. A sense of urgency pulsed through her as they locked eye contact. This meeting could shift everything. "Jenny," Sarah said, masking her nervousness with a smile, "we need to talk." The warmth in Jenny's gaze was comforting, yet laced with something sharper. A curiosity mixed with the weight of unspoken questions. Sarah's heart fluttered as the years melted away between them. Memories of shared laughter and competitive academic dreams danced in her mind, but so did the shadows of regrets and misunderstandings. "Sarah, you look different. Stronger, maybe?" Jenny ventured, her tone cautious yet open. "Thanks, I guess," Sarah replied, forcing a smile that felt both genuine and strained. Who was she now? A mother, a budding writer, a woman grappling with her past. "I've been busy trying to figure things out." Jenny nodded, her expression softening. "I know what you mean. Life has a way of knocking us sideways. I heard about everything. I just wanted to check in." The vulnerability in Jenny's eyes stirred something deep in Sarah. She remembered their last interaction, the fallout after her life unraveled, and her decisions seemed to betray all they had envisioned together. "It's been difficult," Sarah said, letting out a breath she didn't realize she was holding. "But I'm trying to grow, you know." A flicker of understanding crossed Jenny's face, yet the pause stretched between them, a reminder of the chasm created by Sarah's choices. "I get it. Sometimes you just have to step away to find out who you really are. But have you spoken to Mark?" The mention of his name sent a ripple of anxiety coursing through Sarah. "I'm meeting him soon," she confessed, her resolve wavering. "It's about work. Writing, I mean. It could help me gain some footing. But it brings up a lot." Jenny raised an eyebrow, the concern evident. "Are you sure that's a good idea? He hurt you, Sarah. Trust is hard to regain." "Which is why I'm not going in blind this time," Sarah asserted, the steel creeping back into her voice. "It's not about relying on him. It's about taking control of my narrative." Yet self-doubt gnawed at her insides. Was she truly ready to confront the past in the name of progress? Jenny leaned in closer, excitement illuminating her face. "I love that you're writing again. Have you thought about sharing your story? Real stories resonate with real people, especially those who might feel lost like we did." Encouragement swelled within Sarah as she considered Jenny's words. Perhaps writing was her means of healing, not just for herself, but for others too. "What if I wrote about starting over? About facing those difficult choices head-on?" "Exactly! Just think of the impact. You might inspire others who are navigating their own challenges." Jenny's voice brimmed with conviction, igniting a fire in Sarah's heart. The direction of the conversation shifted, and with it came a surge of inspiration. Ideas flooded Sarah's mind, envisioning articles that reflected not only her journey through motherhood, but her struggles with identity, past traumas, and resilience. Each story could be an affirmation of strength, an encouragement for others to find their own voices in the chiaroscuro of their lives. However, she quickly became aware that the confrontation with Mark loomed ahead. The fear that accompanied it was familiar, yet there was newfound determination as well. Could she truly reframe how she approached this meeting? "Thank you, Jenny," she said, feeling lighter, the weight of uncertainty lessened by the connection they shared. "This helps more than you know." As they exchanged phone numbers and hugged tight like old friends do, Sarah felt a thread of hope weaving through her plans. Yet the reality of her past with Mark still lurked ominously in the background. She now had a publication in mind, stories to write, the perfect platform to reclaim her voice. Yet as she turned to leave, ready to tackle her next steps, a thought flashed. Would confronting Mark be an exercise in empowerment? Or would it fracture the fragile progress she had begun to make? Uncertain, Sarah felt a chill creep up her spine. The moment of truth was approaching. "Tomorrow I face him," she whispered to herself, doubts twisting in her gut. But in that same breath, something else crystallized. Whatever the outcome, she was determined to emerge, stronger than the echoes of her past. The morning dawned with an uneasy brightness, the sun glimmering against the window pane like an unwelcome reminder of the day that lay ahead. Sarah wrapped her arms around herself, the weight of anticipation pressing against her chest. She had spent the night restless, visions of her meeting with Mark colliding chaotically with her aspirations to write. After dropping her daughter off at school, she returned to the quiet of her home, a sanctuary that was starting to feel less like a cage and more like a foundation. But the thought of Mark haunted the edges of her consciousness. She fled to her writing desk, convinced that pouring her fears onto the page might offer serenity. "Okay, Sarah," she murmured, picking up her pen. "Let's write this down." The blank page stared back at her, an expanse of uncharted territory. She decided to begin with her intentions. "Today I confront my past, not as a victim, but as a woman reclaiming her narrative." Words flowed as she shaped her thoughts into sentences. The act of writing felt liberating, yet the undercurrent of anxiety persisted. She realized that confronting Mark wasn't merely about discussing professional opportunities. It was an unearthing of emotions long buried. It was about laying bare her vulnerabilities, showing him and herself that she had evolved. Suddenly, a memory surfaced. The last time they had spoken, the harshness in his tone rattling her confidence to its core. She responded to his cruelty with silence, a choice that had then felt like resigned acceptance. Would it help to remind him of that day, or should she focus on what had changed? The pen hesitated, hovering above the paper as she wrestled with indecision. "No," she finally scribbled. "Today is about meeting at the crossroads of who I was and who I've become." Sarah felt a spark of clarity. This meeting was not only about Mark, but also about embracing her own transformation. What had once felt like desolation was morphing into strength, an identity unshackled from the shadows of her past. After hours of coffee-fueled writing, bookmarks strewn throughout her pages, she closed her notebook, feeling as though she'd carved pathways through turbulent waters. It wasn't just words on paper, it was a map leading back to herself, dotted with the milestones of her journey. As the time of her meeting approached, she exchanged her sweatpants for a simple yet confident outfit, a representation of the growth she had forged through her struggles. When she looked in the mirror, the woman staring back infused with determination unnerved her, yet exhilarated her simultaneously. She arrived early at the cafe, her heart racing as she brushed against the world of normalcy around her. It struck her how far she had come, and yet the image of meeting Mark loomed over the bustling atmosphere, like the shadow of an impending storm. Minutes stretched into what felt like hours. Her reflection in the window echoed her anxiety. Why was it so hard to let go of the past? Mark's arrival jolted her from her thoughts. He walked in, all ease and familiarity, an image intertwined within her past. Yet even in seeing him, Sarah realized she was no longer that girl who had felt so lost. The woman she had built was ready to speak, to stand her ground. "Sarah," he greeted, the same warmth and distance mingled within one word. "Mark," she replied, grounding herself in the moment, knowing this encounter was about more than just words. It was about her emancipation. They sat down, the air thick with unspoken tensions. Each tick of the clock marked the impending confrontation, the chance for Sarah to steer the narrative with accountability and vision. But as the conversation progressed, she felt her heart rate quicken. There was a question that had lodged deep within her mind, threatening to surface uninvited. Could confronting Mark also mean addressing the choice she had made, the decision that had changed everything? As his laughter filled the small space between them, she knew the moment had arrived. Would the power she had found within herself hold against the tides of their shared history? "Mark," she began, gathering resolve, "there's something we need to discuss." With those words, she sensed the familiar pull of her past tightening like a noose, yet she pressed on. The time had come to face her history, and Sarah was ready to define not just her past, but her future as well. As Sarah spoke those words, each syllable flooded her with a complex mixture of fear and determination. She recognized the pivotal moment stretching out before her, the potential of this conversation to unravel the tightly woven threads of her life. Mark's expression shifted from surprise to curious interest, the air around them charged with expectations that hung like sacred vows. "What do you want to discuss?" Mark leaned back slightly, inviting but cautious. Those familiar eyes were scrutinizing her, and she felt the weight of their shared past pressing down between them. Taking a breath, Sarah felt the urge to falter, yet she drew strength from her resolve. "I want to talk about the projects we once envisioned, the paths we took that were intertwined, but more importantly, I need to address how those paths fractured and how I have changed." His brows knitted together, confusion flickering. "I didn't think you wanted to discuss work. I assumed it would be—" He trailed off, the unsaid encasing another shared history. "Personal?" she suggested, a half-smile escaping her lips, an attempt to ease the tension. His nod was slight, but it propelled her forward. "Mark, you made choices that impacted our lives, that impacted me," she said, her voice steadied by the gravity of the moment. "But I've made choices too. I've fought hard to redefine what I want from my life." Fire ignited in her core as she recounted her journey, the nights of isolation, scribbling words in a journal when her thoughts betrayed her, lost in the conflict of motherhood and ambition. The more she spoke, the more she felt unanchored from her former self, untethered from his expectations. "I remember the last time we talked," she continued, "how your words influenced me, made me doubt my ability. I accepted it quietly, and that was a mistake. I was so wrapped up in what you thought of me that I lost sight of who I wanted to be." Mark's eyes swerved away, almost defensive. Her words seemed to have struck a nerve, pushing against his carefully constructed barriers. She watched him visibly shift, wrestling with the memories she had unearthed. "You think I don't regret that?" he said, suddenly fierce. "That it never bothered me? It's not easy to own those mistakes." Sarah felt the tension crackle in the space between them. "Then let's own them together. Let's discuss how we can ease that burden, how I can step into my own light without feeling weighed down by our past." His gaze lingered on her, processing her plea. She saw his resistance battling against a grudging respect. There, she recognized the intersection of their lives, the shared struggle for acknowledgement, the desire for validation. She could feel the pendulum swinging, bringing along uncertainty, but also the potential for collaboration. "It sounds like you've found your voice again," he remarked, a hint of admiration creeping into his tone. "But what do you want from me, Sarah? What do you expect now?" That was the crux of her ambition, a reaching for a professional partnership that had the possibility to lift both their dreams. But beneath it lay a deeper yearning for professional respect, and just as importantly, for herself. Clarity dawned in that moment. "I want us to create something together again," she said with a newfound boldness. "I won't be your shadow. I want to find a way to collaborate, to share our strengths but also respect our boundaries." For a moment, Mark remained silent, carefully weighing her words as if etching them into memory. The air thickened with an unexpected tension as she laid her vulnerability bare for him to see. Would he recognize the strength not only within her words, but within the woman who had rebuilt her identity? "Collaborate," he echoed, and in that instant, Sarah felt both hopeful and terrified. Could this moment validate her growth, or would it pull her back into the complexities of their shared past? As Mark's gaze bore into hers, she sensed the dynamic shifting once more, an uncharted course unfurling between them, full of potential or peril, depending on how they navigated the waters. "Let's talk about how that would work," he finally said, a cautious optimism threading through his words. But the underlying essence of that conversation, buried in vulnerability and opportunity, sent shivers down her spine. Was this the beginning of a new chapter, or merely a chance to relive old patterns? "Mark," she asked, her heart pounding, "what if this partnership leads us to confront even deeper issues than we are prepared for?" An unspoken fear hung around her question as she braced herself for yet another revelation lurking just beneath the surface. Would she truly be ready to embrace what was to come? The air felt thick with possibility, yet Sarah knew it was also fraught with the kind of revelations that could shatter the fragile hope they'd begun to construct. Mark's silence enveloped them, stretching into an uncomfortable silence laden with unspoken truths. She watched his expression shift again, thoughtful, contemplative, before finally responding. "Maybe it's time," he said, voice hoarse, "to confront the real reasons we drifted apart. As much as I've moved on, I can't ignore the past." A wave of relief washed over Sarah. There it was, the acknowledgement she had long sought. Yet beneath that relief lurked the old anxiety she'd worked so hard to shed. Would this conversation lead her to a deeper understanding, or would it drag her back into the shadows of self-doubt? "I'm ready," she stated, steadying her breath. "I've clawed my way back from a place that almost swallowed me whole. I refuse to allow fear to dictate my future. If we're going to work together again, we need to be honest about everything." Mark leaned forward, engaging with renewed focus. "What does honesty mean for you? How do we dismantle the past while still respecting the paths we've chosen?" Sarah's mind raced as his words reverberated. This was no simple partnership. It challenged her to grapple with the mentors, missteps, and mistrust that tainted their history. Yet, there was an undeniable fire propelling her forward. "To me, it means addressing our fears head-on," she replied. "I spent years questioning my worth and the choices I made. I want to sculpt our collaboration on mutual respect, where neither of us is reduced to who we once were." Mark's brow furrowed. "And what if you find that part of that respect means walking away from me again?" "Then I will," she answered without hesitation, the words ringing true within her. "But I need to know that if we do this, it won't be another cycle of silencing my voice." The stakes had never been higher. The prospect of collaboration now felt pivotal, but fraught with the risk of old habits re-emerging. As she looked into his eyes, she saw a reflection of her own journey, his vulnerability mingling with the shadow of doubt. Mark sighed, visibly exhaling years of pent-up frustration. "Let's lay everything out. You and I share a vision, but our failures can't be ignored. We have to define the terms of our partnership, or we'll just repeat history." The process would require honesty, not only about dreams and aspirations, but also about the bitter roots of their past. With each word they exchanged, bricks were pulled from the walls they had forged, however precariously, around their perceptions of each other. "So where do we start?" Sarah asked, a mixture of anticipation and dread in her tone. "Let's break down what we want." His insight scythed through the denser emotion, opening a pathway to a constructive dialogue. "What skills can we each bring to the table? What do we fear losing?" Their discussion evolved, tackling skills, strengths, and even character flaws. Each point raised became a cornerstone of their budding framework, a potential roadmap for the collaboration that hung in the air like suspended notes. But just as they began to sketch their aspirations, skepticism tugged at Sarah's thoughts. Could they realistically move past the residual anger and disappointment lurking within those conversations? Would Mark be receptive enough to build a foundation without the ghost of expectation hovering over them? "Sarah," Mark said suddenly, jolting her from her spiraling thoughts, "I know we're not the same people we were, but what if the truth reveals something we're both not ready to accept?" She recognized that fear reflected not just in his words, but also burrowed deep within her own fears. The new path required them to confront not only their professional dynamics, but the emotionally charged residues of a relationship that had both built and devastated them. "Are you prepared to face those truths together?" Sarah asked, holding her breath. The tension escalated, a sharp intake of air as Mark's gaze held her steady. They were at the precipice of discovery, both aware that what lay below was steep, uncharted, yet potentially transformative. "I am," he replied with surprising certainty. "But we have to be ready for the consequences. This isn't just about us anymore. It's also about what we do from here." The implications loomed large, wrapping around Sarah with renewed intensity. She felt as if they were on the cusp of reclaiming both the past and a future that had once felt impossibly distant. "Then let's find out," she whispered, the path forward unfurling before them like a daring invitation. That invitation stirred uncertainty within her. Would they be empowered by their confrontation, or would it spiral into another labyrinth of hurt? As their discussion deepened and the clock ticked on, Sarah realized one crucial truth. In order to step boldly into a new partnership, she would need to embrace the intertwined shadows of their histories. The question loomed larger than ever. Could she trust him enough to shed her armor and allow vulnerability to guide them into this ghosts of their interconnected past? The morning sun spilled through the window, illuminating Sarah's workspace as she sat at her desk, surrounded by a melange of papers, sketches, and ideas waiting to be brought to life. The air smelled faintly of fresh coffee, an anchor in a sea of uncertainty. Yet that morning, her confidence felt ironically misplaced against the vibrant backdrop of a new day. Despite the clarity that had emerged during her conversation with Mark, a nagging doubt festered in her mind. She had struggled so hard to redefine her self-worth and re-establish boundaries. Now, just when she thought she might be able to weave the threads of creativity together again, she faced the specter of her past partnership surfacing like an unwelcome guest. What if honesty twisted into blame? What if their raw truths unraveled the fragile tapestry of their bond? She could feel the weight of her decision pressing down, challenging her resolve to embrace vulnerability. Sarah reached for her notebook, the pages filled with thoughts about their proposed collaboration. As she scanned her ideas, it became clear. Each intention she penned represented not only professional ambition, but also a personal commitment to her growth. What skills could she bring to this renewed partnership? Certainly, her problem-solving abilities had sharpened through countless obstacles, parallel to her personal battles. Clarity dawned. She needed to channel her fears into strengths instead of allowing them to crumple under the pressure of potential conflict. She penned down her thoughts: creativity, resilience, compassion, a willingness to confront the uncomfortable. Each word felt liberating, like shedding the remnants of past wounds. But would Mark value that rebirth? As she focused on their project plans, Sarah caught herself caught in spirals of contemplation. What doubts had lingered in their silence? Would he truly accept her newfound courage? She needed to believe it was possible. After all, both of them aspired to build a bridge from disconnection to collaboration. Setting the notebook aside, she made a series of strategic notes on what they could accomplish together. The product vision took shape, the outlines gaining definition as she forged ahead. However, her focus continuously drifted back to Mark's expression during their last meeting. The mix of hope and trepidation etched into his features left her wondering if he was genuinely on the same page or merely appeasing her. With a resolute breath, she grabbed her phone and texted Mark, suggesting they meet again to discuss the framework they had begun constructing. The message pinned her to the present, forcing her to confront the reality of their working dynamic head-on. Later that afternoon, as she prepared for their meeting, anticipation mixed with anxiety. How could she foster an atmosphere of constructive openness? This time, she wouldn't allow her voice to blend into the background. She would create space for dialogues that would not only sustain their ambitions, but also validate her emotional journey. She arrived early, setting up the space with care, lingering by the window to observe the light shift as the day waned. Soon after, Mark walked in, a hesitant smile on his lips. Their eyes locked, and for a moment the silence spoke volumes, a testament to the shared understanding that still existed in the spaces between them. "Thanks for meeting again," he said, taking a seat across from her. "Of course, I think it's essential that we define where we're headed. I've thought a lot about our last conversation." As they dove into plans, Sarah felt the tension begin to dissipate. But as they explored their objectives, she recognized that conversations about dreams often lead to deeper discussions about fears and insecurities disguised beneath surface-level aspirations. "Let's talk logistics," Mark proposed, but Sarah could sense the weight behind his words. Their trajectory was set, but she could feel the approach of an inevitable confrontation looming just beyond the horizon. "Before we dive in, can we circle back to why we began this conversation in the first place?" she urged, allowing herself to lean into the vulnerability she had feared. His gaze flickered, a dawning recognition in his eyes. They both understood the importance of addressing the past to create a sustainable future. "I guess we need to unpack the complications," he said, voice steady but colored with uncertainty. "The fear of repeating past mistakes is what drives me." "Yes," Sarah replied, "and it drives me too. But if we truly want to grow, we have to unveil those complexities, however challenging it may feel. Their choice lay before them, to either embrace the uncomfortable truths of their shared history, or allow those same truths to derail their aspirations once again. In that moment, Sarah felt an inkling of empowerment rising within her, a new determination to face what they had both buried. But the question loomed ominously in the air. Would confronting their past illuminate a path to an enriched future together? Or would it shatter everything they hoped to build once and for all? The afternoon sun poured through the cafe windows, illuminating Sarah and Mark as they prepared to delve deeper into their conversation about the framework of their collaborative venture. The mood alternated between tentative excitement and the undercurrent of shared uncertainty that seemed to hover in the air, waiting to be addressed. As they arranged their notes, Sarah felt a wave of clarity wash over her. A sense that this conversation was not merely about logistics or their professional alignment. It was about healing, confronting their mutual shadows, and forging a future resilient enough to withstand the weight of their past. "Mark," she began, taking a measured breath, "before we dive into the practicalities of this project, we need to reflect on why we ended up here. I've thought about our last meeting every day since. We have to unpack that history, not just gloss over it. If we ignore what has brought us to this point, we risk repeating the same patterns." He looked at her, the flicker of recognition in his eyes igniting something within her. "You're right. Avoiding the past hasn't served either of us. But facing it, it's daunting," he admitted, running a hand through his hair, revealing his vulnerability. "Daunting, yes, but necessary," she responded, a steadiness in her voice. "I want to reclaim my narrative. Have you thought about how our past choices might still influence our decisions today, especially if we begin to work together again?" A moment of silence lingered, packed with echoes from their history. Mark's gaze dropped, deep in thought. "It's hard to ignore the mistakes I made. I don't want to dredge up that narrative for either of us, but I also know it lingers in the background. It will only transform into an insurmountable obstacle if we don't confront it," she replied firmly, trying to champion the emotional honesty that could potentially reshape their collaboration. "I fought hard to transcend who I was. I can't afford to navigate this project half-heartedly while still carrying fragments of my past with you. I need to know you're committed to growth too." Mark lifted his chin, meeting her gaze head-on. "I want to take responsibility for the past. I've been so afraid of losing the opportunity to work with you again, I feared confronting my share of it. But I recognize that avoidance won't lead us anywhere new. We need to build this on trust and transparency." With those words, Sarah felt a weight lift. It was a commitment, a spark of hope igniting between them as they began to outline what they had yet to face. "Let's identify the specific events that created distance between us, the moments we both shied away from. Only by labeling and addressing those can we begin to redefine the collaboration. I need to reclaim my voice within this partnership." The resolve in her voice caught him off guard, dimming the hesitation that had previously colored his features. "We both know it goes back to the busy days that turned uncertain. I regret not being more supportive when you needed me," he stated, visible remorse coloring his tone. "You deserved a better partner then." "I was lost, yes," Sarah agreed, "but you didn't find the courage to meet me halfway. I kept waiting for you to step up, and in doing so, I lost confidence in us both. But that was before. Now I'm ready to confront failures, but it needs to happen with mutual respect." Facing their shared failures felt both cleansing and risky as they peeled back the layers of their past. Each truth laid bare brought them closer together, revealing the common threads of their experiences that were now woven into this aspirational new beginning. "We also need to acknowledge what we've learned since then," Mark interjected, his voice steadier now. "How can we use our individual growth to reinforce this collaboration? What strengths do we bring that we didn't possess back then?" Sarah felt invigorated. The conversation had shifted into a new realm, one fueled by dignity rather than despair. "I've found my voice through writing. Community support has been essential in making me believe I can create my own narrative rather than just accept it. I want to weave that into our project. It has to be rooted in authenticity and transparency to resonate with others who have faced similar battles." Mark nodded, admiration apparent. And I've learned resilience from managing my own challenges, failures I've faced, and the lessons I've pulled from those experiences. We can guide each other, enhancing the dimensions of our project. But it has to begin with us having that defense against allowing history to dictate our approach. We have to ensure our partnership thrives independently of what we've previously entangled ourselves in. The turning point felt electrifying. Their burdens lightened as they created space to redefine what working with each other could mean. Then, as they set about discussing goals and aspirations, Sarah saw the opportunity emerge before her. The chance not just to realize dreams, but build lasting respect. The future unfurled like a creased page, freshly written, waiting for their hands to shape it into something meaningful. We'll outline our strengths and how they complement, Sarah said, breathing easier with each moment. Let's strive for a partnership that empowers us both and highlights our growth. It's more than the project. It's about showing that two individuals can transcend their past struggles by leaning into collaboration. As the conversation evolved into actionable steps, both Sarah and Mark felt an undeniable shift. Each word acted as a pivotal block, setting the foundation for something robust and enduring. What emerged before them felt empowered and purposeful. An evolved partnership defined by empowerment, respect, and an unyielding commitment to learning from the past without being shackled by it. Sarah felt newfound strength as she committed once again to finding her voice, and this time, she could visualize her narrative intertwining harmoniously with Mark's. They were no longer bound by old fears. Instead, they embraced the thrill of seeking success together. Two determined individuals, ready to conquer not just their individual dreams, but also a shared future that embraced both struggle and triumph. With their discussion branching into exciting project ideas and strategies for collaboration, Sarah finally realized her potential was ready to shine, and she welcomed the acknowledgement of their dynamic transformation with open arms. The journey ahead was still rife with uncertainty, but together, armed with clarity, they had forged an unshakable bond. Stepping into the next chapter, Sarah felt as if she had not only reclaimed her narrative, but solidified her resolve, and finally achieved the personal fulfillment she had long desired, one where she could redefine herself while contributing to a shared vision without the chains of yesterday dictating the shape of their future. It was true, she was ready to make her mark. Now, dear viewers, you need to subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. This is the moment to show your support and dive into more powerful narratives of resilience and transformation. Don't wait even one more second to share this.